Before I died, Daniel Hayes sat beside my hospital bed holding a photograph of another woman and asked me, if we'd gotten married 1 hour later that day, do you think everything would have been different? So when I got a second chance at life, I gave him that hour back. Every last minute of it. Welcome to revenge cookies. She died with his question still hanging in the air. If we'd married 1 hour later, would everything have been different? So when life gave her that hour back, the morning of the wedding, she didn't run to him. She gave it away and watched him choose exactly what he always chose. But at 9:15 that morning, Daniel knocked on my door. 3 knocks, a 2-second pause, then 2 more. Exactly the same as the first time around. I slid the transfer letter from regional headquarters back into my desk drawer, pushed it shut, and locked it. Laura. His voice came through the door. Our civil ceremony starts at 10. If you take much longer, our first day of married life is going to begin with a speeding ticket. I opened the door. Daniel stood in the narrow dorm hallway in a white shirt and dark slacks. A manila envelope of wedding paperwork tucked under one arm. We'd gotten our marriage license 3 days earlier. All we had left to do was show up at City Hall for the simple ceremony. His tie was crooked. Every other time I'd seen it like that, I'd reached up and fixed it for him. This time, I put both hands in my coat pockets. Daniel glanced down at his tie, then back at me. Nervous, a little, he smiled. His eyes didn't have those tired lines yet. Come on, Mrs. Hayes. My stomach clenched. I looked down and zipped my coat. You go ahead. The keys stopped moving between his fingers. What? I have a set of drawings I need to drop off for Miller. Go on. I'll meet you there. Today. He stared at me for a few seconds, pressing his tongue against the inside of his cheek. Daniel always did that when he was annoyed. In my first life, the second I saw it, I would explain myself, soothe him, rearrange my schedule. I checked my watch. 9:22. Go save our spot. I am not going to make you marry yourself. That made him laugh. Finally, he turned and headed downstairs. His dress shoes struck the wooden steps one by one until the sound disappeared. I closed the door and leaned against it for 3 seconds. Then, I picked up my purse and went to Mrs. Turner's little grocery store. She was sliding a fresh apple pie into the glass case when she saw me take a seat at the counter. She nearly knocked over the coffee pot. Isn't today your wedding? 10 o'clock. She looked at the clock on the wall, 9:41. Then she looked at me again. You are getting married in 19 minutes, Daniel went ahead. You sent the groom by himself. He knows the way. Mrs. Turner narrowed her eyes and pushed a slice of pie toward me. You two have a fight. Number, are you running away from your wedding? Not yet. She stared at me for 2 seconds, then topped off my coffee. Laura Bennett, you are deeply unsettling today. I speared a piece of apple with my fork. She'd gone a little heavy on the cinnamon, but it was still good. At 10:03, she checked the clock for the 3rd time. Now, you are officially late. Daniel's going to lose his mind. I finished the last of my coffee. Maybe not. Maybe he is going to be in an unusually good mood today. At 10:18, I parked outside City Hall. Several couples were waiting near the entrance, some holding flowers, others clutching paperwork. At the bottom of the steps sat a curly-haired woman in a pale blouse, dust on one cuff and several pages scattered beside her. Daniel was crouched in front of her. I stopped. The woman was looking down. Daniel had one hand braced around her lower leg. Here, he asked. She drew in a breath. My ankle hurts a little. Can you stand? I'll try. She put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. He looked up. For the first time, they really saw each other. His hand didn't move away right away. Neither did her eyes. Rebecca Collins. I recognized her from more than 60 feet away. In my first life, the first time I saw Rebecca, our ceremony was already over. Daniel had happened to run into her on the steps and helped pick up her papers. I'd even stood beside him laughing about how clumsy the poor woman was. That night, Daniel slept with his back to me and didn't close his eyes once. More than 20 years later, he told me from the chair beside my hospital bed that it hadn't been wedding nerves. He'd been regretting it, regretting that we hadn't gotten married 1 hour later. Rebecca spotted me first. Her fingers tightened slightly on Daniel's shoulder. He followed her gaze. The smile vanished from his face. Laura, I walked over. Daniel shot to his feet. Rebecca lost her balance. And he caught her automatically. No hesitation at all. I looked at his hand, then at her. Looks like I missed something. She fell, Daniel said quickly. I was just about to take her to the clinic. Then you should. He blinked. I should. If she hurt her ankle, she shouldn't be walking on it. Rebecca lifted her face. You are Laura. I looked at her. In this life, they had known each other for maybe 20 minutes. And she already knew my name. Rebecca smiled quickly. Daniel just mentioned you. Today's your big day, right? She said big day with her hand still resting on Daniel's arm. Daniel finally noticed and looked down. Rebecca slowly pulled her hand away. Sorry. It is fine. The city hall door opened, and a clerk leaned outside holding a list. Daniel Hayes, Laura Bennett, she called once. Daniel was bent toward Rebecca, asking whether she could walk. He didn't hear. The clerk called again. Daniel Hayes, Laura Bennett. I stood 10 paces away. Daniel was helping another woman toward the parking lot. He still didn't hear. I did. The clerk looked at me. Ma'am, I pointed toward Daniel's back. The groom's a little busy. She followed my finger, and one eyebrow slowly rose. I couldn't help it. I laughed. At 10:27, our appointment was crossed off the list. Only then did Daniel turn around. Laura, what about tomorrow? Rebecca's place is pretty far from the clinic. Even if I come right back, we won't make it today. Rebecca lowered her head. You should stay. I can go by myself. She took one step, her ankle gave way, and she folded straight into Daniel's arms. A man smoking nearby took the cigarette away from his mouth, looked at them, then looked at me. I gave him a small nod. He immediately looked somewhere else. Daniel steadied Rebecca. I'll take her. Dinner tonight. We'll see. He walked a few steps, then turned back. You are really not mad. Why would I be? We were supposed to get married today. I looked at him. Yeah. Before Rebecca got into the car, she looked at me over the top of the door. It wasn't an apologetic look. It was victory. Daniel shut her door for her and walked around to the driver's side. After his car disappeared around the corner, I went back inside City Hall, dropped a coin into the lobby payphone, and dialed. The phone rang 4 times. Regional Engineering Office. Hi, this is Laura Bennett. I heard papers shifting on the other end. Laura, aren't you getting married today? I am calling about the transfer to the senior design team. Through the glass doors. Daniel's car turned the corner and vanished completely. I am accepting it. There was a 2-second pause. You are sure? Last week you said you might turn it down. I am sure. Then I'll start the paperwork today. Can you report next Monday? Yes. I hung up and looked at the clock on the lobby wall. 10:32. I had only been 1 hour late. This time, I wasn't going to be 20 years late with it. Daniel didn't come back until 9 that night. I was sitting on the dorm floor with 2 cardboard boxes open in front of me, packing technical manuals and project files I planned to take back east. He came in carrying a paper bag with a container of hot soup peeking out of the top. You didn't go to the cafeteria? He asked. I ate. Daniel put the bag on the table. His eyes landed on the boxes. Why are you packing? Organizing. Like this. I put a thick design manual into the box and closed the lid. Daniel stood there for a moment, looking like he wanted to ask more but stopped himself. Rebecca's fine. Just a mild sprain. That is good. Something happened at her house. The tape in my hand stopped. That hadn't happened in my first life. What? Her parents' old place has been empty for a long time. She went back today and found a burst pipe. The bedroom wall is soaked. She can't stay there tonight. I looked up. Daniel rubbed the side of his nose. I knew that gesture too well. Even he knew whatever he was about to say wasn't going to sound right. I was thinking, we haven't officially moved into the cottage yet. I said nothing. His voice dropped. Rebecca could stay there for a couple of nights, just until the pipe is fixed. The cottage we were supposed to move into after the wedding sat behind the project housing. Daniel had rented it ahead of time. 2 bedrooms, a tiny living room, and the wind chime I had picked out the week before hanging from the porch. In my first life, I'd gone there after our wedding with the paperwork, clutched to my chest, seen the white paper decorations on the windows, and been ridiculously happy. Years later, the only sound in that house that ever truly felt like mine was probably the bed frame creaking when I rolled over alone at night. Fine. I said. Daniel stared at me. Fine. You pay the rent. It is your call. His mouth opened, but all the explanations he had prepared seemed to get stuck at once. I am taking my things out. Though, Laura, you don't have to do this. Do what? Act like you are drawing a line between us. I looked down and tore off a strip of tape. You are reading too much into it. He was quiet for a few seconds, then pushed the soup toward me. I brought you dinner. Thanks. Rebecca thought you might be upset. I looked up. She is very concerned about me. Daniel's expression turned awkward. She just doesn't want to cause problems between us. She must be very considerate. He studied my face, looking for sarcasm. He didn't find any. 10 minutes later, we went to the cottage so I could pick up my things. The second the door opened, I smelled coffee. Rebecca was sitting by the couch with a bandage around her ankle and 2 cups in front of her. The moment she saw me, she stood. Laura, I was just about to come apologize to you myself. As soon as she got to her feet, her ankle seemed to remember it was injured, and she tilted sideways. Daniel caught her arm on instinct. Don't move around. Rebecca smiled up at him. I forgot. I walked past them and went into the bedroom. The sheets I had bought were already on the bed, pale blue. Tiny white flowers. I'd spent 20 minutes choosing them. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. Daniel said the bed would be more comfortable. I told him I could sleep on the couch, but he wouldn't let me. Did you buy these sheets? Yes. She ran her fingers over the pillowcase. They're beautiful. Daniel said, you are really good at picking things out. Thank you. You really don't mind me staying here. I opened the closet and started removing my clothes 1 piece at a time. Rebecca leaned against the doorframe and waited a couple of seconds. I kept folding. Then she said, it just feels strange. I mean, I am sleeping in Daniel's wedding bed. I finally turned around. Her eyes brightened. I tucked the folded sweater into a paper bag. Don't worry. About what? You may end up needing it longer than I will. The smile at the corner of Rebecca's mouth stopped. Daniel walked in just then. Laura. Yay. Don't say things like that. What did I say? The room went quiet for a beat. Rebecca laughed first. Don't fight because of me. I really can leave. She reached for the coat draped over a chair. Daniel stopped her. And go sleep in a damp house. Don't be ridiculous. But Laura won't make a big deal out of it. He said it so naturally. I snapped the clasp shut on my bag. That was how it had always been. Laura won't make a big deal out of it. Laura is reasonable. Laura has a job. Laura can handle things. Laura won't worry her parents. Laura can raise a child on her own. Laura always finds a way. So every problem eventually slipped under the door and landed at my feet. I picked up the bag. Daniel reached for it. I'll carry it. It is heavy. I've got it. Rebecca stood beside the bed watching us. Then she smiled. Daniel, did you always carry things for Laura? She hurt her wrist once, Daniel said. My hand paused. I'd sprained it climbing down a scaffold ladder when the project first started. He remembered. That was the difficult thing about Daniel. It wasn't that he had never been good to me. If he had been a complete jerk from the beginning, I never would have walked into that first life with him. He left hot coffee on my desk when I worked late. He checked my calculations. He drove through pouring rain to pick me up from the site. Then one day, he met Rebecca. Those small kindnesses didn't disappear. They just developed in order, Rebecca first, me second. We were almost at the door when Mrs. Turner happened to ride past on her bicycle. She spotted Rebecca standing on the porch in Daniel's coat. Her wheels slowed. She looked at Rebecca. Then Daniel, the large paper bag in my hand. Evening, I said first. Mrs. Turner pressed her lips into a line. Looks lively over here. It is. She hadn't gone 50 yards before she looked back. I knew that by morning, half the project site would know Daniel Hayes had brought another woman home to the cottage, meant for his bride on the day of his wedding. Sure enough, the next morning, when I went to the office to turn in design files, Nancy, the typist, handed me coffee wearing the expression of a woman who had been holding a question in all night. Laura, I do not gossip. Of course not. I am just worried about you. Thank you. So who was the curly-haired woman? I nearly choked on my coffee. The 2 engineers beside us both lowered their heads over their drawings. Their ears, however, were practically standing at attention. Rebecca Collins, I said. Nancy lowered her voice. She moved into the place you and Daniel were supposed to live in after the wedding. Temporarily. Where is she sleeping? I looked at her. Nancy's eyes slowly widened. I patted her shoulder. Excellent coffee. At noon, I went to see Miller, the project manager. He was looking over the facts from headquarters. Reginald approved it, he said. I'll have the office book your train for Friday. Laura, are you sure you don't want a few extra days? Friday is perfect. Does Daniel know? Miller looked up. I pushed the last handover form across his desk. He looked at my signature, then at me. Weren't you two getting married? We were. He didn't ask anything else. He picked up his pen and signed. Headquarters has wanted you for a long time. Don't be late, I smiled. Not this time. That afternoon, I started selling what I wasn't taking with me. Nancy bought the little dining table. I gave 2 chairs to a new surveyor. Mrs. Turner claimed an unopened baking pan before I could even put a price on it. She stood in my doorway with the pan tucked under one arm. You are really leaving? Friday. Daniel, no. Not yet. Her mouth opened. Then she seemed to think better of whatever she was going to say. Finally, she muttered. That boy must have never had anyone take a toy away from him when he was little. What does that mean? Mrs. Turner shifted the pan under her arm. Nothing. He just doesn't look at you like a man getting ready to marry you anymore. He looks like someone just walked off with the chair he thought would always be there. That evening, when I came back from work, Daniel was sitting outside my dorm room exactly as I expected. He was holding a paper bag from the breakfast counter. For you. What is it? Blueberry muffins. Your favorite. I took the bag. Rebecca came up the path from the other direction wearing Daniel's coat from the day before. The moment she saw the bag, she stopped. Daniel, I haven't had dinner yet. Daniel turned. He hesitated for 1 second. Then he took the bag right back out of my hands. There are 2. Have one. Rebecca brightened. Really? Daniel opened the bag and handed one to her. She took a bite. That is so good. I looked at my empty hand. Daniel seemed to remember me all at once. Laura, I'll get you more tomorrow. It is fine. I opened my dorm door. I already ate. I hadn't. 10 minutes later, I was sitting in the project cafeteria with a 2-egg plate, hash browns, and a huge slice of apple pie. Nancy set her tray down across from me. That is a lot of dinner. I cut into the eggs and watched the yolk run into the potatoes. I suddenly have a great appetite. Outside the window, Daniel and Rebecca walked past along the road. Rebecca was holding the other half of the blueberry muffin. She said something. Daniel laughed. I looked down and finished the last bite of pie. Before going back to the dorm, I stopped at the post office and made a long-distance call. My mother answered. Laura, how was the wedding? I gripped the receiver. Something seemed to close around my throat. Someone beside me was feeding coins into another phone. A car passed outside. I opened my mouth twice before any sound came out. Mom, I didn't get married. Silence. My father's voice came closer almost immediately. Did Daniel do something to you? I looked down at the toes of my shoes. Then why are you crying? I lifted a hand to my face. My fingertips came away, wet. I hadn't even realized I was crying. I am coming home Friday, my mother answered without hesitation. Good. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask what people would say. She only said, come home. Your room is still yours. I closed my eyes. Before we hung up, my father shouted from somewhere beside her. I'll get the apples you like. A laugh broke out of me. The air was cold when I stepped outside the post office. In the distance, the little cottage that was supposed to belong to Daniel and me was lit up. 2 shadows moved against the curtains. One in the kitchen, one sitting at the table. They looked exactly like a married couple who had been living together for years. I stood there for less than 3 seconds before turning back toward the dorm. I still had 3 boxes of materials to hand over tomorrow. I didn't have time to stand around while someone else practiced being newlyweds in my place. On the 3rd day, Rebecca invited me to dinner. More precisely, she came to the project office and invited me in front of 6 people. Laura, come over to the house tonight. The house. She was already calling it that. Nancy's typewriter stopped mid-keystroke. Rebecca smiled sweetly. Daniel promised he'd make dinner. He says he is really good at steak. You've known him for so long, so I am sure you've had it before. The office got so quiet I could hear someone turn a sheet of paper. I looked at Daniel. He was standing at the other end of the corridor with a roll of drawings under one arm, his face stiff, all the way from his collar to his ears. "You cook?" I asked. Daniel coughed. "A little." "Then no, I've never had it." Rebecca's eyes lit up. I added, "What time?" She blinked. "What? Dinner. 6:30. Great." Rebecca looked like someone had spent all afternoon setting up fireworks, only to have the first match drowned by rain. The smile stayed on her lips, but her eyes were half a beat behind. After work, I stopped by Mrs. Turner's store and bought an ordinary bottle of table wine and a box of crackers. She stared at me as I paid. "You are actually going?" "Why turn down free dinner? Your fiancé is cooking for another woman." "Potential former fiancé. Potential. Depends on whether he finds time to rebook City Hall." Mrs. Turner stared at me for a long second, then laughed so hard she nearly had to grab the counter. At 6:30 sharp, I knocked on the cottage door. Rebecca opened it wearing a pale dress with her hair pinned up. She took the wine from me with the smooth confidence of a hostess. "You actually came. You were so enthusiastic about the invitation." Oil sizzled in the kitchen. Daniel was wearing an apron and turning steaks in a pan. I stood in the doorway and watched him for 2 seconds. In my first life, during the few months of my pregnancy when he briefly came back to me, I once got so sick I could barely stand. I asked him to make me some soup. He broke a bowl, burned 2 pieces of toast, and finally tossed the spatula into the sink. "Laura, I really don't know how to do this." That night, I held onto the counter and made the simplest soup I could manage by myself. Now Daniel handled the tongs with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times. He looked up and saw me. "Sit down. Almost ready. You look like a professional." "I learned in the dorms back in college." I nodded. So he did know how. Rebecca put the wine on the table. "Daniel said yesterday he could make this for me every weekend." Then she looked at me. I pulled out a chair. "Lucky you." First came the salad. Rebecca mentioned that Daniel had remembered she didn't eat onions, then the steak. She told me he'd gone to 2 different markets to find the best cut, then baked potatoes. She said he had asked the night before whether she preferred butter or cream. After every detail, she looked at me. I kept eating. The steak was genuinely good. Finally, Rebecca couldn't stand it anymore. "Laura, don't you think this is strange?" I put down my knife and fork. "What is?" "Daniel never did any of this for you." Daniel's fork hit his plate with a sharp little clink. Rebecca covered her mouth, as if she had only just realized what she had said. "I am sorry. I didn't mean it like that." "It is fine. Rebecca." I pointed at her plate. "If you don't eat, the steak Daniel spent half the day choosing is going to get cold." Her sentence died in her throat. I went back to cutting my food. Daniel kept staring at me. "Laura, do you really not care at all?" "Care about what?" "Today was supposed to be our 3rd day. Our 3rd day of what?" Rebecca's smile faded a little. I lifted my water glass. "But we didn't get married." Daniel said nothing. A knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Turner stood on the porch holding up the baking pan. "I came to return Laura's pan." I looked at it. "I gave it to you." "I know." She stayed exactly where she was. "Just remembered I never thanked you." Rebecca clearly did not want her coming inside. "We're having dinner. I can see that." Mrs. Turner's gaze moved over the table and finally landed on Daniel's apron. "Daniel, when did you learn to cook steak?" His face got even stiffer. "College." "Well, Laura sure got the short end of that deal. Dated you all this time, and somehow missed your entire college cooking career." I nearly spit out my water. Rebecca stopped smiling completely. Mrs. Turner walked away looking perfectly satisfied. Still carrying the pan, after dinner, Rebecca suggested I stay for coffee. "No thanks. I have an early morning." Daniel followed me outside. "I'll walk you. It is 200 yards. It is dark. The whole project site is lit." He came anyway. Halfway back, he said my name. "Laura." I stopped. Daniel pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "Here." Inside was his paycheck for the month and a stack of cash. I looked up. "What is this?" "Once we're married, we're supposed to handle money together." "But we aren't married. We can reschedule." He spoke quickly now. "Tomorrow, the day after, whenever." "Laura, I know the last few days have been messy, but Rebecca just needed help. I am not going to throw away 2 years with you over someone I've known for a few days." I stared at the envelope. In more than 20 years of marriage in my first life, I never once saw one of Daniel's paychecks in full. After he disappeared, I paid his parents' medical bills. I repaired their roof. I handled funeral expenses. When I gave birth, and the hospital bill was more than I could cover. My parents brought their savings in the middle of the night. Where was Daniel? I learned later that winter he and Rebecca were living in a small town down south, renting an apartment with a fireplace. I opened the envelope. Hope flickered in Daniel's eyes. I counted out part of the cash. The new sheets were $22. I paid for them. I took $11. The dishes were $40. I took $20. The dining table was $60. I already sold it. Half was yours. I put $30 back into the envelope and took my share. The color slowly drained from Daniel's face. "Laura, what are you doing?" "Settling up. That is not why I gave you the money. But that is what I need it for." I pushed the rest of the cash, the paycheck, and the envelope back into his hands. "Perfect." He stared at me. "Now neither of us owes the other anything." Daniel tightened his hand around the envelope. "Are you punishing me?" "Number. Then why are you calculating everything down to the dollar?" "Because it is easier to move when everything is settled." His eyes snapped up. "Move." I turned away. "Laura." He caught up and grabbed my wrist, then released it immediately, almost startled by his own hand. "Where are you going?" "Back to the dorm." "I am not asking about tonight." I looked at him. In the distance, the cottage door opened. Rebecca stood under the porch light. She was too far away to hear us, but she could see Daniel had followed me out. I put my hands back in my pockets. "Daniel, Rebecca's waiting for you." He didn't look back. "Laura, what is going on with you?" "I am fine. You were never like this before." I smiled faintly. "People change. In a few days. Sometimes an hour is enough." I left him standing there. The next morning, headquarters called to confirm my transfer. Nancy answered. She covered the receiver and waved me over. "Reginald wants to know if you are definitely reporting Monday." Every head in the office came up. Daniel had just walked in. I took the phone. "Yes, definitely." The person on the other end said something. "Yes, I am leaving Friday evening." Daniel stood frozen in the doorway. Nancy's eyes moved back and forth between us. I hung up. Daniel crossed the room in 3 long strides. "You are transferring?" "Yes." "When did you decide?" "On our wedding day." "Why didn't you tell me?" "You were busy." Simone in the office coughed. Daniel's expression darkened. "Laura, let's talk outside. I have drawings to turn in." "Laura." I looked up at him. "Daniel, we're at work." Whatever else he wanted to say disappeared behind his teeth. Rebecca came by that afternoon. This time, she wasn't smiling. She stood in the doorway, watching me pack the personal things from my desk. "You are really leaving?" "Friday. Because of me." "Because headquarters offered me a promotion." She clearly didn't like that answer. "Don't you want to know who Daniel is going to choose?" I put the last pencil into my box. "Rebecca, why are you so determined to make me participate?" "In what?" "The competition." Her face changed. I picked up the box and walked past her. "If you want him, go get him." That evening, I went to the cottage early to pick up my last box of books. The door wasn't completely closed. As I reached the porch, I heard Rebecca's lowered voice inside. "She is leaving anyway. Why do you keep looking at her?" "I don't," Daniel said. "You are lying." "Rebecca, do you regret not marrying her?" Silence. 5 full seconds. Then Rebecca rose on her toes and kissed him. Daniel's hand lifted and stopped in midair. He didn't push her away. I stood outside the half-open door, watching them move closer under the light. The box in my arms was heavy. I shifted it higher. A chair scraped inside. Daniel opened his eyes. Through the gap in the door, he saw me. His hand jerked away from Rebecca's waist. "Laura," Rebecca turned. I rested the box against the doorframe long enough to free one hand. "Don't stop on my account." Daniel went white. I bent down and picked up the box again. "I am just here for my books." Then I turned and walked off the porch. Footsteps followed almost immediately. This time, I knew his explanation had finally caught up with me. Daniel reached me under the second street lamp. Laura, let me explain. I stopped and set the box on a bench by the road. All right. He clearly hadn't expected me to agree so easily. He took 2 breaths. Rebecca just suddenly kissed you. Yes. And you didn't push her away. His mouth closed. Go on. It wasn't what it looked like. Then what did it look like? Daniel rubbed his forehead. My head's been a mess these last few days. Why? I don't know. I do. He looked at me. I checked my watch. On our wedding day, you'd known Rebecca for about an hour when you missed our ceremony to take her to the clinic. 3 hours later, you drove her back to the site. She hurt her ankle. 5 hours later, you had dinner with her and forgot the food you originally brought for me. Laura, 7 hours later, you brought her into the cottage we were supposed to live in after our wedding and let her sleep in our bed. His face slowly went rigid. In less than 2 days, you remembered she doesn't eat onions. You learned how she takes her coffee. You went to 2 different markets to find the steak she likes. On the 3rd day, you kissed her beside that bed. Daniel swallowed. So tell me. I looked straight at him. Which part did I misunderstand? A cyclist passed in the distance, the headlight sweeping across us. Daniel said nothing. I picked up my box. He suddenly stepped in front of me. I never meant to hurt you. Meaning to do something and actually doing it are 2 different things. I do have feelings for her, finally, he said it. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. I almost laughed. Daniel stepped closer. We've had 2 years, Laura. We stood out at the site together in pouring rain. We stayed up all night fixing designs. I know you drink your coffee black. I know your hands are always cold in winter. I know thunderstorms scare you. Those things are real. I didn't deny it. They are. A little hope returned to his eyes. So maybe we still... Daniel, your feelings for Rebecca are real too. The hope stopped. The problem was never whether you loved me, I said. The problem is that you want to keep 2 different lives at the same time. He frowned. What does that mean? Rebecca feels new. She looks at you like you are the only man in the world. You like that. Daniel's mouth tightened. And I have a steady job. I know how to manage money. I solve problems. I know your parents. If you marry me, your life stays organized. You are making me sound calculating. Then tell me this. If you already have feelings for her, why did you hand me your paycheck and push to reschedule the wedding? Daniel didn't answer. I nodded once. Because you don't want to lose Rebecca, and you don't want to lose the stability I give you either. His expression changed. I lifted the box again. It is not that you don't know what you want. You want all of it. Daniel stood there as his shoulders slowly sank. I had taken several steps when he called after me. What if I choose you? I turned around. Now. What if I tell Rebecca today that this has to stop? Too late. Because I already chose. Chose what? A life without you. I carried the box back to the dorm. Less than 10 minutes after I shut the door, someone knocked again. I thought it was Daniel. It was Rebecca. She wasn't wearing the pale dress from earlier. She had thrown on a dark coat, her hair loose around her shoulders. The soft, fragile smile she usually wore was gone. Let me in. Why? Because we need to talk. I stepped aside. Rebecca came in. The first thing she saw was the 3 sealed boxes against the wall. She turned to me. You are really leaving. You already knew that. I didn't know you'd leave this fast. Then she stopped. I looked at her. She looked at me. The only sound in the room was the second hand of the clock. Slowly, she said. You came back too, didn't you? I didn't move. Rebecca smiled. Not that careful little smile she always wore. I knew it. She sat in my chair, as if she had finally peeled off a layer of skin. You were nothing like this last time. You chased Daniel for answers. You cried. You endured everything. If you saw me move into that cottage, there is no way you would have said nothing. I leaned against the desk. So your ankle was never hurt. Rebecca glanced at the ankle that was now perfectly fine. Of course not. And the pipe didn't just happen to burst today. I shut off the main valve ahead of time and soaked the bedroom wall myself. She said it with perfect calm. I knew Daniel would hesitate if he met me before the wedding. In our last life, he told me over and over that if he had met me a little earlier, if he had signed those papers a little later, he would have chosen me without hesitation. Our license was already signed, I corrected. What we missed was the ceremony. Irritation flashed across Rebecca's face. That doesn't matter. Not to you, apparently. She stood. Laura, stop acting so superior. So what if you were Mrs. Hayes last time? My fingers tightened slightly. Daniel lived with me for more than 20 years. She stared at me, her words coming faster. He told me I was the one he really loved. He said your marriage had been a mistake from the beginning, and after Ethan grew up, he came to see us too. My breath caught for half a second. Rebecca saw it. Her eyes lit up immediately. You didn't know. I said nothing. After he became an adult, he called Daniel every year. He ate dinner at our house. He even called me Mom. The edge of the desk dug into my palm. I moved my hand away. In my first life, Ethan was always busy. He couldn't come home for Thanksgiving. He had plans with friends at Christmas. Sometimes he looked at my old sweaters and frowned. Mom, do you have to wear yourself out all the time? I thought he was worried about me. Maybe he had simply seen another woman who looked lighter, prettier, freer. Rebecca stepped closer. That is why I am not spending this life hiding behind somebody else's marriage. I want Daniel to choose me in public. I want his last name. I am going to be Mrs. Hayes. I looked at her. The pain in my chest hadn't completely faded. Strangely, though, I wasn't as angry as I thought I would be. I suddenly remembered the first birthday cake Ethan bought for me after he became an adult. My name was misspelled. He wrote Laura instead of Laura. I laughed at the time and asked how my own son could get his mother's name wrong. Now, I understood that some relationships had been cracked for a long time. I had simply been the last person to see the damage. Rebecca waited for me to explode. Instead, I opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. What are you doing? Checking what I have to turn in tomorrow. She stared. Did you not hear what I just said? I heard you, and you have nothing to say. I flipped to the last page and checked the signature. One thing. Rebecca lifted her chin. I closed the folder. I hope you get everything you want. Her expression slowly changed. What is that supposed to mean? Exactly what it sounds like. Are you pitying me? Number Laura. Rebecca, what you wanted most in the last life was my place, wasn't it? She said nothing. I walked over and opened the door for her. Then don't spend this life standing in the doorway. She stared at me. Go in. Rebecca left with hard, heavy steps. Half an hour later, Daniel came back. I didn't open the door. He stood outside for a long time. Laura, I know you are awake. I sat on the edge of my bed and tucked my Friday train ticket into my wallet. I'll straighten things out with Rebecca. I said nothing. I am not going to let you just leave. The hallway went quiet for a while. You can't throw away 2 years because of 3 bad days. I looked at the thin shadow beneath my door. In my first life, it took me more than 20 years to let go of those 2 years. This time, 3 days already felt slow. The next morning, I had barely stepped into the office when I heard an argument outside. Rebecca was standing in the middle of the parking lot. Daniel was in front of her. Several windows around the project site seemed to open at the same time. Mrs. Turner somehow appeared too, holding a cup of coffee. Rebecca wasn't shouting, but her voice carried just far enough for everyone nearby to hear. Daniel, I am not accepting. I need time. He lowered his voice. Let's talk inside. Why? Didn't you say you have feelings for me? Daniel's face darkened. Rebecca kept going. Then choose. She pointed toward the office. Her or me? Every pair of eyes turned through the glass toward me. Nancy was sitting beside me, holding a sheet of paper halfway to the typewriter. Want me to close the window, she whispered. I picked up my coffee. Number outside. Daniel finally raised his head. Through the glass, he saw me. Rebecca turned too. One wanted an answer. The other was waiting to be chosen. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone a little cold. Then I reached over and closed the window. This time, I wasn't one of the answers on their multiple choice test. Daniel finally chose Rebecca at 3 o'clock Thursday afternoon. Not over a candlelit dinner. Not anywhere romantic. He did it outside the project cafeteria. It had rained earlier, and the ground was all mud. A dozen people stood beneath the awning with coffee and paper lunch bags, waiting for the weather to clear. Rebecca asked him again, how much longer are you going to drag this out? Daniel saw me coming out of the office. I was carrying my final box of files, with Miller walking beside me. Daniel's jaw tightened. Laura. I stopped. The whole area went silent. Even Mrs. Turner folded the newspaper in her hands. Daniel looked at me. I think we need to make this clear, okay? Our wedding is off. Rebecca stood beside him, her eyes almost glowing. I nodded. Okay. My answer seemed to sting him. Rebecca and I are going to see where this goes. Okay. Laura, can you stop saying okay? I adjusted the box in my arms. What would you like me to say? His lips moved, but nothing came out. Rebecca slipped her arm through his. It was a small gesture. But everyone saw it. Daniel made his choice, she said. I looked at her. For the first time, she smiled like she believed she had truly won. I shifted the box higher. Congratulations. Mrs. Turner coughed beside us. Nancy lowered her head, but her shoulders were visibly shaking. Daniel's face darkened further. You really don't care at all. Daniel. I looked at him. You just canceled our wedding in front of a crowd and announced that you are going to be with another woman. And the thing you most need to know right now is whether I am jealous. The cafeteria entrance went dead quiet. Daniel's ears turned bright red. Rebecca tightened her hold on his arm. I turned to Miller. Is the car here? Administration said. They'll take you to the station at 5. Daniel's head snapped up. Today? I've been saying Friday all week. You never told me what time. You never asked. I carried the files back toward the office. Behind me, Rebecca said, under her breath. Let her go. Daniel didn't answer. At 4:30, the office gave me a tiny farewell. No banner. No cake. Nancy bought a few pastries from the cafeteria. Miller found a bottle of soda. And everyone came by one, at a time, to shake my hand. Reginald is going to love you. Don't forget us. Who is going to check my bridge calculations now? I laughed and hugged them one by one. Daniel stood in the doorway. He didn't come in. The moment people noticed him, the room paused for half a second. Finally, Miller walked over. Hayes, you need something. I want to talk to Laura for a minute. I put the last bite of pastry into my mouth. 5 minutes. We walked around to the storage area behind the office. Daniel spoke first. You'd already decided. Yes. Before I met Rebecca, about half an hour after. He looked like he had swallowed something the wrong way. So no matter who I chose today, you were leaving? Yes. Then all these days, you were just watching me. Make your choices. You were testing me. I looked at him. Daniel, for the first time. I simply stopped protecting you from the consequences. Confusion filled his face. I wasn't going to explain further. Some things couldn't be understood by a man who hadn't lived through the 20 years I remembered. Daniel leaned against the wall. After a long silence, he asked, What if I hadn't taken Rebecca to the clinic that day? There is no what if. What if I'd heard City Hall call our names? You didn't. What if I tell you I regret it now? I checked my watch. Then you should probably talk to Rebecca. He reached out as if to block my way. Laura, I didn't choose her because I stopped loving you. I know, you know. You are just more afraid of losing the thing you haven't had yet. His hand slowly fell. A car horn sounded outside. 5 o'clock. I walked out. Nancy helped load my luggage into the car. Mrs. Turner appeared from nowhere and shoved a paper bag at me. For the train. I looked inside. Apple pie. I thought you said the baking pan was yours now. The pan is mine. The pie is mine. Don't argue. She hugged me and whispered in my ear, right when you get there. If anyone around here manages to burn his entire life to the ground, I'll send you the details. My shoulders shook with laughter. Daniel stood a short distance away. Rebecca had come too. A thin ring circled the finger of her left hand. Not a real wedding ring. Just a plain band Daniel had once bought as a temporary stand-in for an engagement ring. She deliberately rested that hand on the car door. Laura. I looked at her. Daniel says, once things settle down, we're going to book a new ceremony. Congratulations. I am going to be Mrs. Hayes. I know. Rebecca looked ready to say more. Daniel cut her off. Enough. Her smile disappeared instantly. I got into the car. As we pulled away, Daniel took 2 steps forward. Laura. The driver glanced at me. Want me to stop? Number in the rearview mirror. Daniel grew smaller and smaller. Rebecca stayed where she was. She didn't follow him. She only watched the car. By the time I reached the station, it was dark. I handed my ticket to the clerk. Coach or sleeper? he asked while checking it. I looked down at my wallet. In my first life, I would always have chosen the cheaper option. Money saved could buy things for the baby. It could help with Daniel's parents' electric bill. It could sit in an envelope for the next emergency. This time, I slid my coach ticket back across the counter. Can I upgrade to a sleeper? The clerk checked the clock. 1 left. I'll take it. It'll cost extra. That is fine. I took the new ticket boarded with Mrs. Turner's paper bag in my arms and found my compartment. The berth was narrow. The sheets weren't especially new, but the second my back touched the pillow, my eyelids grew heavy. I hadn't fallen asleep that quickly in years. Daniel wasn't in my dreams. Neither was Rebecca. No hospital. No door closing behind Ethan. Only the steady rhythm of train wheels striking the rails. The next morning, an announcement woke me. My parents were standing on the platform. The second my mother saw me, she rushed over and wrapped her arms around me. My bag dropped from my hand. She kept touching my hair, my face, my shoulders. "You've lost weight," my father said from behind her. "Where? You say that every time you see her." My mother turned and glared. "Be quiet." He did, then bent down and hoisted my suitcase. I smiled. A second later, tears spilled out without warning. My mother looked alarmed. "What is it?" I shook my head. She held me tighter. "It is okay. You are home." I buried my face against her shoulder. In my first life, they had run themselves ragged for me. They went to hospitals. They borrowed money. They endured Daniel's parents blaming them. Even near the end of their own lives, they worried about what would happen to me when I was alone. Now my father's back was still straight. My mother's hands were still warm. I cried so hard, I couldn't speak. My father stood beside us, pretending to inspect my train ticket. After a while, he said quietly, "I bought the apples." I laughed through my tears. On my third day home, a letter arrived. Mrs. Turner's crooked handwriting filled the page. The first line read, "Second day after you left. Daniel and Rebecca had their first fight over who was supposed to wash the dishes." I laughed out loud. My mother poked her head out of the kitchen. "Who is that from?" "A friend," I kept reading. The second line said, "Don't get too excited. They already made up. Rebecca is telling everybody they're getting married next month." The third line had only 5 words. She got what she wanted. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer. Next Monday, I would report to regional headquarters. Rebecca was finally going to become Mrs. Hayes, and for the first time, I had absolutely no interest in that name. Rebecca really did become Mrs. Hayes 6 weeks later. I didn't go. Mrs. Turner sent me a photograph. Outside City Hall, Rebecca wore a simple white dress with her arm looped through Daniel's. She was smiling so hard her eyes were nearly closed. On the back of the photo, Mrs. Turner had written one line, "This time he wasn't late." I slipped the picture into an envelope and put it at the very bottom of my desk. By then, I had been at regional headquarters for a month. The pace there was much faster than it had been out in the mountains. During my first week, I worked until 10 2 nights in a row. On the third morning, the department head dropped a stack of calculations onto my desk. "Bennett, you were right about the load issue you flagged yesterday." A dozen people around the conference room looked up at once. I set down my pencil. "The East supports need to be recalculated." "Exactly. So you are in charge." I looked up. He had already pushed the file toward me. "Don't make me regret transferring you back here." I took it. "I won't." There were no flowers. No man standing beside me applauding. Just coffee that went cold by 3 in the afternoon and a growing stack of blueprints on my desk. And I slept well every night. 3 months later, I got a raise. 6 months later, I led my first project on my own. A year later, a nearby university invited me to teach an engineering design class once a week. The first time I stood at the chalkboard, the piece of chalk snapped in my hand. Someone in the room laughed. So did I. Then I turned around and wrote the formula again. After class, a young woman hurried after me. "Professor Bennett, are you teaching again next semester?" I stopped. Professor Bennett. The title seemed to hang in the air for several seconds. "If they still want me," she smiled. "They better." That night, I called my parents. After I told them, my father asked only one question. "Do professors make good money?" My mother called him hopelessly practical from somewhere beside him. I laughed so hard I had to lean over the table. News about Daniel kept reaching me through Mrs. Turner's letters. At first, it was all small things. Rebecca complained that Daniel's parents came over every weekend. Daniel's mother complained that Rebecca didn't cook the food they were used to. One night at 2 a.m, Daniel's father's water heater broke, and he called his son to come over. Daniel had work the next morning, so he handed the phone to Rebecca. At that point in the letter, Mrs. Turner had drawn a huge exclamation mark. She finally understands why you were always tired. I read that part aloud to my mother. Her knife paused halfway through slicing an apple. Daniel's parents are still like that. Yep, well, that girl wanted the marriage, now she can live it. She pushed the apple slices toward me. I took one. We didn't discuss it any further. By the second year, the story stopped being funny. Daniel applied for a transfer back to the eastern region. His parents moved back to a small town nearby as well. Rebecca still didn't have a steady job. At first, she said she wanted an office position. Then Daniel's mother had treatment on her knee, and Rebecca ended up driving her back and forth every day. Mrs. Turner wrote in her last letter, "She told me at the post office yesterday that everyone treats her like a free chauffeur." By the time I reached that sentence, the coffee in my hand had gone cold. I had said almost the exact same thing in my first life. That day, Daniel's father was being discharged from the hospital with no notice. Ethan had a fever. I had a report due at the office. I stood in the hospital parking lot holding my sick child and told Daniel's mother over the phone, "I cannot do everything by myself." Her answer had been, "Isn't that what family is for? We help each other." Now the same words had landed on Rebecca. I didn't feel triumphant. I simply folded the letter and put it away. In the spring of the 3rd year, Daniel appeared at my office. I was discussing a design with 2 younger engineers when my secretary leaned in through the door. "Laura, there is a Daniel Hayes here to see you." My pencil stopped above the drawing. "Ask him to wait 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, I walked into the reception room. Daniel was standing by the window. He was thinner. His hair was cut shorter, and the suit made him look more formal than I remembered. When he saw me, he smiled first. "Professor Bennett, how did you know?" "I heard." I sat down. "What do you need?" Daniel sat across from me with a folder resting on his knees. I transferred to the branch here. "Congratulations." Rebecca came too. "Okay." He looked at me as if he expected more. I gave him nothing. "You look good," he said. "Thank you. Your parents, they're good." You paused. "Did you get married?" I smiled. Number to my surprise, Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly, I noticed. He looked down and ran his thumb along the edge of the folder. "There is something I've wanted to tell you for years." "What?" "I used to think the problem between Rebecca and me was timing." I said nothing. "I thought if I had met her earlier, before you and I planned the wedding, I would have been happy." Daniel gave a bitter little smile. "Then I actually married her." Someone pushed a cart of files past the door outside. The wheels rattled softly. "And?" I asked. "And I realized life is still life." "Of course it is." He looked up. "You already knew." "I knew you." The color drained from his face. "I am not here to ask you to take me back." "That is good." I managed to leave him with no response ready. I checked my watch. "I have a class at noon." Daniel suddenly said, "Rebecca and I are separated." I nodded. "She says I've changed." "Have you?" He fell silent. I stood. "Daniel, I have work to do." He stood too. "Laura." I reached the door. "If you hadn't been late that day." My hand stopped on the handle. That sentence again. He had used it to explain more than 20 years in my first life. Now, in this one, he was still trying to squeeze an entire life into a single hour. I turned around. "Daniel, I wasn't the reason you missed our wedding that day." He stared at me. City Hall called our names twice. I opened the door. "You just didn't hear them." After class that afternoon, I saw Rebecca outside the academic building. She was leaning against an old car in a dark coat. Her hair was much shorter now. When she saw me, she didn't put on her old smile. "He came to see you." "He did? What did he say?" "You should ask him." Rebecca stared at me. "Are you enjoying this?" I stopped walking. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes, and she was gripping a stack of papers in one hand. "You knew this would happen." "No, I didn't. The way you looked at me back then." It was like you knew. I studied her. 3 years earlier, she had stood in my dorm room and told me she wanted Daniel's last name, my place. Everything she believed I had stolen from her in the first life. Now, she had had all of it. The only thing I knew was that Daniel wasn't going to become a different man just because he was with a different woman. Her lips pressed together. He has feelings for someone else again. I said nothing. A coworker at the branch. The wind lifted one corner of the papers in her hand. She pressed them down. He says they just understand each other. I almost laughed when I heard it. Rebecca did laugh. Then, slowly, her eyes turned red. Sound familiar? She asked. Very. She looked down at the papers. I used to think you stayed with him because you couldn't stand to lose. Number. Then why didn't you leave in the first life? I thought about it, because I thought staying was part of being responsible. Rebecca looked up, and later I realized some responsibilities are just other people setting their luggage in your hands and forgetting to take it back. She was quiet for a while. These are divorce papers. She tapped the stack in her hand. I am not making excuses for him anymore. Then don't. Rebecca looked at me for several seconds. You don't hate me. I didn't answer immediately. It would have been a lie to say I felt no hatred at all. Those lonely nights in my first life were real. The cold of the hospital room was real. Ethan calling her mom was real too. But the woman in front of me was no longer the great love Daniel had spent decades romanticizing in a photograph. She was just Rebecca. A woman who had once believed that if she could take another woman's man, she could take her happiness too. I don't want to spend any more of my life hating you, I said. Her gaze dropped. I walked past her toward the parking lot. After a few steps, she called my name. Laura. I turned. Did that 1 hour really change everything? I looked at the sunset reflected in the glass of the academic building. Students were pouring out through the doors with books in their arms. Some were arguing about assignments. Others were laughing. On the windowsill in my office sat the apples my father had brought me the day before. My mother expected me home for dinner that evening. Next week, I was taking my students to visit a new bridge project. I turned back to Rebecca. Number, she blinked. It just let me see everything sooner. I got into my car, in the rearview mirror. Rebecca was still standing where I had left her. I started the engine and drove out of the university lot. In my first life, Daniel had asked whether everything would have been different if we had married 1 hour later that day. Now, I finally had my answer. That hour didn't ruin my wedding. It simply let me out of the wrong life. Let's be clear about Daniel Hayes. He didn't miss that wedding because of timing. He missed it because he was already looking for an exit. A woman with a conveniently sprained ankle needed him, and suddenly the woman he'd promised forever became an afterthought. He wanted the stability Laura provided and the novelty Rebecca offered. He wanted 2 lives but only 1 set of consequences. That is not love. That is greed wearing a wedding band. And Rebecca, she thought she was stealing a prize. She faked an injury, slipped into another woman's sheets, and smiled like she'd won. But a man who cheats with you will cheat on you. She learned that soon enough, driving his mother to appointments, arguing over dishes, watching him repeat the same pattern with a new coworker. She spent years chasing his last name, only to discover it was never worth having. Laura didn't win by fighting harder. She won by walking away. She stopped fixing his tie. She stopped explaining herself. She stopped performing pain for a man who didn't care enough to hear his own name called at City Hall. And in that silence, she found her own voice, her own career, her own life. That hour didn't ruin her wedding. It set her free. So here is what I need you to remember tonight. Loves, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Don't compete for a prize that was never worth winning. The right door doesn't require you to disappear to fit through it. The story's told. She walked away and built a life he could never re-enter. Now it is your turn. Are you ready to choose yourself? I am Nova. Sweet dreams tonight. And tomorrow, rise from the ashes. Reborn.